Right, so the structure's laid out. We've adjusted the volume. The tracks have come in and automatically been assigned a random number. And now I'm going to put everything into folders. So, just be very quick. Drums, all in one folder. It's not always how I would do it. In fact, I would actually put the toms in their own folder, at least to start off with. Kick snare overheads. The overheads have been recorded as or delivered as a stereo pair. Sometimes you'll get left-right overhead, in which case I would put overheads into their own folder as well, so that I can treat them as a stereo pair. And also with left-right overheads, like mono left, mono right overheads, I'd put them into a folder, and then I would pan them hard left and right. And if I wanted to bring them in the stereo image, I would just use the width on their folder track, rather than playing around with the pan. It saves you, half the time of going, changing pan settings on the left and right file. So the same thing if I suppose if I've panned the toms hard left and right, I would do the same thing. I would play around with their pan settings here. Because they sound pretty full on if they're hard stereo. Okay. Acoustic guitar. This is a DI and this is a mic. And if I put them into a folder. They sound okay, kind of panned left and right to give you a kind of a central acoustic guitar sound that also has a little bit of different life on the left and right. Mandolin, I think what I've done in this mix here.
With what heart can we find peace with?
I've kind of put them on the left. I've given them a kind of life, given them a space on the left to live in. So again, I might pan one a bit more than the other. Cello, I think, same thing in that other mix. I've put them kind of over on the right, and one's a bit more right than the other. So, kind of setting everybody on the stage, I think, is a nice term that I've read. That as people, as the instruments come in, you're kind of imagine them on a stage, so they're not just hard stage right, hard stage left, unless you're doing LCR mixing. So I've kind of put the obvious things in folders now. As you can see, drums, toms are in their own folder so that I can treat them as a stereo pair. The overhead kick and snare and the toms folder are in a drums folder. There's two acoustic guitars, so they're in a folder. Mandolins, there's two of them, they're in a folder. Cellos. Now the lead vocal, the backing vocal, and the bass are all single tracks, and you would think, why put them in a folder? And you'd be right. There's kind of no reason to put them in a folder apart from this is a kind of workflow I have in the mixer panel, which is this shortcut here, Hide Children MCP. So it selects everything except the folder parents and toggles their visibility So you're just flipping between seeing all the tracks and only seeing the parent tracks. Okay, so that looks like this. Okay, so you can see the drums folder and you can see the toms folder. You can see the acoustic guitar folder. Yeah. And if you look down here, this is the folder that we're highlighting, cellos. And these are the tracks inside which aren't visible in the mixer panel now. So now every track is visible in the mixer panel. Yeah, I'm moving up through the tracks. So therefore, the problem is we can only see anything that's in a folder. And I haven't come up with a better solution, but for me what works is I put the vocal track in its own folder, I put the backing track in its own folder, and I put the bass in its own folder. So now when I toggle the folders, I can see everything. So this isn't the vocal track now, this isn't the lead vocal track, that's the lead vocal track, and it's just going into a folder. Nothing's happening to it other than it's going into a folder. And adding another audio track or a folder in Reaper isn't going to kill your CPU. Okay, so we're still under 4% of CPU. So just you can add as many tracks as you want, pretty much. They don't really do much. So that's it really. That's how I kind of structure my folders. And what you will have noticed is that every time I create a folder, a couple of things happen. One thing is it asks me what I want to call the folder. So if I create a new track, call it new. So this is just an audio track, and I press my shortcut. It says, what do you want to call the folder track that we're now? So I call it new. Okay, so now I've got my new folder track, which I've called new, and the track is nested in the folder. The other thing that happens is that it immediately loads up 3 plugins for me that I find very useful. So it gives me a kind of desk emulation with high pass, low pass, and a dynamic mid-range EQ. It gives me a very functional EQ that sounds good to my ears, and then it gives me a very functional compressor that also sounds good. And so these are kind of I can really quickly get everything sounding the way I want it to, just with these 3 plugins. And I'm sure next week it'll be a different 3 plugins, but at the moment and for the last couple of projects I've mixed, these have been on every folder pretty much, and been, you know, very useful to me. So how do you do that? I will get to that in the next video, because that's a cycle action. So this is the end of the folders video. This just shows you a quick way of kind of organizing a mix. You can see we've got auto colors, so every time you create a folder it gives it its own color, and to my eyes that looks nice and legible. If I go back to the default theme, still will look like that. Okay. Great. Thank you very much.